Welcome to Concrete Block, the podcast where we dive into the latest news and current events that shape our world. I'm your host, Walter, and I'm glad you're joining us today. We're starting off with a complex story involving international trade, politics, and energy. The United States has imposed tariffs on India due to its purchases of Russian oil. This move is seen as part of the U.S. efforts to pressure Russia over its war in Ukraine. However, it's essential to understand the nuances behind this decision. India is the second largest buyer of Russian crude, after China, with a significant trade relationship worth billions of dollars annually. The U.S. has targeted Indian purchases rather than those of China, which raises questions about the motivations behind this move. Some argue that the U.S. is trying to exert influence over India's trade policies, while others see it as an attempt to punish India for not acknowledging the U.S. role in brokering a ceasefire with Pakistan. The implications of these tariffs are far-reaching, affecting not only the energy market, but also U.S. businesses and customers who rely on Indian imports. The total U.S. tariff rate on India now stands at 50%, which will likely lead to increased costs for American consumers. To put this into perspective, if India were to reduce its Russian oil purchases, it would need to find alternative sources, potentially leading to a reshuffling of global energy trade. However, this might not necessarily impact Russia's revenue, as other countries like China could fill the gap. As we explore this story further, it's crucial to consider multiple viewpoints and avoid jumping to conclusions. We'll examine the potential consequences of these tariffs, the role of international politics, and the intricacies of global energy trade. We'll also look into why the U.S. has chosen to target India specifically, while China, the largest buyer of Russian oil, seems to be exempt from similar measures. Is this a strategic move, or is there more to it? As we navigate these complex issues, we'll strive to provide a balanced and fair analysis without taking sides or promoting any particular agenda. We'll be right back with more of today's top news on Concrete Block. Welcome back to Concrete Block. We're diving into a complex and timely story that's affecting millions of people across India and Pakistan. The situation is dire, with heavy rains causing widespread flooding, landslides, and displacement. To break it down for you, let's start with the fact. At least 36 people have lost their lives in India due to landslides and flash floods in the Jammu and Kashmir region. The Indian government has been working tirelessly to provide relief and rescue efforts, but the challenge is enormous. The rains have been relentless, with some areas receiving over 600 millimeters of rainfall in just a few days. That's more than 726% above normal for this time of year. Now, here's where things get complicated. India has had to open its dams to relieve pressure from the heavy rains, which has triggered flood alerts downstream in neighboring Pakistan. The Pakistani government has issued warnings about potential flooding on three major rivers, the Ravi, Chenab, and Sutlej. Authorities have already reported a significant rise in water levels, and rescue efforts are underway to evacuate people from affected areas. It's essential to note that both countries face significant challenges during monsoon season, which runs from June to September. India's decision to open its dams is a routine measure to prevent catastrophic flooding within its own borders. However, the impact on downstream countries like Pakistan can be severe. As we explore this story further, it's crucial to acknowledge the historical context and diplomatic tensions between India and Pakistan. While both nations have a long-standing agreement to share data on water levels and flood warnings, there are concerns about the effectiveness of this communication and the potential for mismanagement. To provide some perspective, let's consider the human impact of these floods. In Pakistan alone, over 150,000 people have been displaced, and more than 20,000 have been rescued from their homes. The Pakistani government has called in the army to assist with relief efforts, highlighting the scale of the crisis. As we continue to monitor this situation, it's essential to remember that flooding knows no borders. The consequences of climate change, deforestation, and infrastructure development are far-reaching and can have devastating effects on communities worldwide. Stay tuned for our final story of the day, right here on Concrete Block. Welcome back to Concrete Block. We're wrapping up today's show with a look at the latest developments in UK immigration policy. The Home Office has announced plans to halve the amount of time asylum seekers can spend in government-funded hotels after being granted refugee status, from 56 days to 28 days. This move has been met with criticism from charities and organizations working with refugees, who argue that it will lead to increased homelessness among newly recognized refugees. On one hand, the government argues that the original extension to 56 days was only intended as a temporary measure, and that they are committed to providing support to those in need while also working to end the use of asylum hotels by 2029. They point out that they have been processing asylum claims more quickly, which should reduce the number of people in the system needing housing support. On the other hand, charities and organizations working with refugees say that the move to 56 days had been effective in reducing homelessness, and that cutting it back to 28 days will put even more pressure on already overstretched local authorities and voluntary sector services. They argue that this could lead to more instances of rough sleeping and homelessness among new refugees. It's a complex issue, and one that highlights the challenges of balancing the need to provide support to those fleeing persecution and violence with the need to manage the asylum system in a sustainable and efficient way. As always, we'll be keeping an eye on this story and bringing you updates as more information becomes available. In other news, the Labour government has been facing criticism over its handling of immigration policy, with some arguing that it is not doing enough to address the root causes of migration or to provide adequate support to those seeking asylum. Meanwhile, others have praised the government's efforts to increase funding for refugee services and to improve the efficiency of the asylum system. As we close out today's show, we want to hear from you. What do you think about the Home Office's decision to cut back on support for newly recognized refugees? Do you think it's a necessary step to manage the asylum system, or do you think it will lead to more homelessness and hardship? Let us know in the comments or on social media. That's all for today's Concrete Block. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and until next time, stay informed.